The first light over the Greenland Sea carried no warmth. Only a faint steel-blue glow spread across the waves, as if the sun itself hesitated to touch this part of the world. HMS Vigilant, a British destroyer escort, moved at a steady 12 knots. Not fast, not slow. Just enough to remain aligned with convoy HX 303, a cluster of 30 merchant ships carrying food, ammunition, and aviation fuel toward Britain. Their wakes merged into one pale streak cutting across the dark ocean. From afar, it looked like a single scar drawn across a wounded sea. On the forward observation deck, signalman Arthur Hale adjusted his hood and raised a pair of salt-stained binoculars. His fingers were stiff. Every breath became a thin cloud streaming away in the wind. The cold here was not a temperature. It was an environment. It shaped posture, movement, even the pace of thought. The night had brought a warning. The convoy was entering a zone the Admiralty called the Gap, a place where Allied aircraft could not patrol, a place U-boats treated as a hunting ground, a place sailors crossed with the quiet resignation of men walking into a storm they could not see. At 0614, Hale spotted the first anomaly. A thin splash. Not a wave. Too vertical, too precise. He swung the binoculars left. A second splash appeared. Then a third. Equal spacing. Perfect timing. Moments later, the starboard lookout shouted the words everyone dreaded. "Torpedo wake bearing 308. The convoy reacted instantly. Klaxons wailed. Engines roared. Orders ricocheted through the ship like rapid-fire commands in a drill gone suddenly real. Hale tracked the wake. It grew brighter as the rising sun caught its surface. The torpedo sliced toward a lumbering fuel tanker in the middle column. The tanker tried to turn, too slow, too heavy, too late. The torpedo hit the ship's port side. A bloom of flame rolled outward. A column of water followed. Then, smoke thick, black, rising straight into the windless morning. Men scrambled for hoses. Others abandoned ship. Some never moved at all. The convoy scattered, each ship adjusting course by instinct, by panic, or by the silent math of self-preservation. And amid the chaos, Hale saw something else. Far beyond the burning tanker. Beyond the disorder of fleeing ships. Beyond the white scars of torpedo wakes. A shape, pale, still, impossible. At first, he thought it was a glacier. But glaciers did not form perfect right angles, and they did not remain motionless in seas like these. The shape looked like a floating mesa, flat on top, broad at the base, edges too straight, too clean, too deliberate to be natural. He tried to judge scale, 1/2 mile long, at least, maybe more. The fog distorted distance. The mind resisted what the eyes were reporting. He blinked. The shape remained. Silent. Alone. Watching. Before Hale could report it, a second torpedo struck another freighter. The blast shook Vigilant itself. Men moved. Alarms screamed. The horizon disappeared behind rising smoke. And when the smoke cleared, fog had rolled across the water like a shifting wall. The shape faded into it, swallowed without ceremony. When the fog lifted 10 minutes later, the horizon was empty again. Hale wrote the sighting in his log. No drama, no interpretation. Just a sentence. Observed large ice structure. Rectilinear. Approx. 700-900 meters. Unmoving. The log would survive the war. Hale's explanation never would. Yet the entry matched something else, something buried deep in wartime research files, hidden behind the label Habakkuk. Months before Hale stared into the mist, a group of British engineers, inside a windowless building in London, watched a block of frozen pulp withstand a pistol round without cracking. The bullet buried itself harmlessly. The block only quivered. The composite was made from water and wood fibers, frozen together. Simple, inexpensive, shockingly strong. The scientists called it Pykrete. Its inventor, Geoffrey Pike, possessed a mind that refused ordinary boundaries. He proposed using this frozen composite to build ships, massive ships, the size of cities when steel was scarce and the Atlantic was swallowing Allied tonnage at a brutal rate. The idea reached Churchill. He considered it for seconds, then ordered immediate exploration. War accelerates imagination. Desperation sanctions the absurd. Project Habakkuk emerged from that urgency, a plan to build a floating airbase of ice in the North Atlantic, a vessel too large to sink, too cold to melt, too strong to break. Design specifications defied traditional naval architecture. Length, up to 2,000 feet. Beam, 300 feet. Hull thickness, 40 feet of reinforced ice. Internal refrigeration pipes to keep the ship frozen even in summer. Runways for heavy bombers. Workshops carved from the frozen interior. Anti-aircraft guns mounted on reinforced decks. The ship would drift in the mid-Atlantic, projecting air power into regions previously controlled by U-boats. It would shrink the ocean, extend Allied reach, deny the Germans the sanctuary they relied upon. Engineers tested the idea. They froze large blocks of pykrete, created prototypes, fired weapons into them, studied stress curves, melt rates, acoustic properties. One block resisted a small explosion. Another endured repeated blows from an axe. A third slowly melted in a warm room, but far more slowly than ordinary ice. The logic was irresistible. Steel was precious. Wood pulp was plentiful. Ice could be shaped. Ice could be repaired. Ice could change the war. But while planners discussed material strengths and thermal loads, men like Hale faced a different kind of calculus. One measured not in tons or degrees, but in heartbeats and seconds. The sonar operators aboard Vigilant sat hunched in a dim, red-lit cabin, headphones pressed tight, hands steady. Their world was a landscape made of echoes, hums, pings, static. Every sound a possibility, every possibility a threat. A faint rhythm emerged. Not mechanical, not biological. Something between. A U-boat screw beating in measured cadence. The ship turned sharply. Depth charges rolled from the rails. Explosions thudded underwater, muted and heavy. Everyone waited. For bubbles, oil, wreckage, confirmation. Nothing surfaced. The ocean withheld its secrets. Above deck, the psychological load grew. Cold ate through clothing. Wind carved faces raw. Eyes strained against fog, glare, and exhaustion. Fear here was disciplined, not panicked. Not dramatic. Just constant. A pressure. A weight shifting from one man's shoulders to the next as the watch changed. In that world, even a gigantic ice structure on the horizon might be accepted without protest. The extraordinary blended into the ordinary. The incredible felt no stranger than the daily fact of being hunted by unseen adversaries. Meanwhile, the project that could have changed everything Habakkuk progressed. A prototype was built on Lake Patricia in Alberta. 60 feet long, tested through a full winter. It survived storms, survived weapons tests, survived engineers trying to melt it with blowtorches. Churchill requested updates weekly. He imagined fleets of ice carriers patrolling the Atlantic, a new kind of naval supremacy built not of metal but of frozen invention. But innovation has enemies. Time, resources, changing conditions. As American factories reached peak steel production, the urgency behind pykrete diminished. As long-range Liberator bombers filled the skies, the mid-Atlantic gap shrank. As escort carriers became more common, the value of a floating ice airfield fell into question. Engineers recalculated refrigeration demands for a ship the size of a small city. The numbers expanded, then ballooned, then became unmanageable. The project slowed, then paused, then quietly froze, ironically not from cold, but from irrelevance. Yet the mystery remained. If no full-scale Habakkuk ship was built, what did Hale see? Some historians point to glacier fragments calved off Greenland. Others cite optical illusions common in polar waters. A few suggest something more provocative: a partial prototype, a test section, a drifting block of experimental pykrete released or abandoned during early trials. The truth may never be known. Hale did not embellish. He did not speculate. He simply recorded. Years later, when interviewed, Hale remained calm in his recollection. "It looked artificial," he said. "Too large to be random. Too still to be natural." He paused. The sea gives you warnings, not explanations. The battle that morning ended without resolution. The convoy lost 3 ships. Vigilant rescued survivors. The U-boats vanished, as they often did, into the deep. The war moved on. Convoys continued. Ships sank. Others survived. A rhythm of destruction and endurance repeated until the balance finally shifted. Project Habakkuk never shaped the Atlantic War, but the idea captured the desperation and creativity of a world fighting for survival. A world where frozen wood pulp became a weapon, where ice became strategy, where a ship that defied every tradition of naval engineering almost became real. War forces nations to imagine beyond their limits. It forces engineers to test the boundaries of physics. It forces sailors to witness things that do not fit into the categories they were taught. Some ships sail. Some ships sink. Some ships exist only as blueprints, prototypes, and stories whispered by men who saw impossible shapes in the fog. History records victories and defeats, but it also records the maybes, the almosts, the things that nearly happened. The ice ship sits in that strange category. Not myth, not fact, something in between. A symbol of what war demands from imagination. A symbol of how far nations will go when pressed against the edge. Hale wrote one more sentence at the bottom of his log that day. A sentence historians often overlook. A sentence simple in form, unsettling in implication. "The sea was calm," he wrote, "but something out there was waiting to be finished." He never explained it. He never revisited it. War taught him that some moments belong only to the men who lived them. Some ideas freeze. Some ideas melt. But all of them leave a trace. Cold, sharp, indelible. The ice ship remains one of those traces. A half-seen shape on a hostile horizon. A blueprint for a world that almost existed. A reminder that even the most fantastic inventions begin with a single sighting, a single thought, a single question, whispered into the wind. What if the impossible is simply misunderstood?